Boy, that camera leaves a lot to be desired. Ah, Chris Wall. How the heck? How the heck did you see this so fast? This is my Craig. Oh boy, Scott. Scott's next door. If you guys hear something banging a rock come through the window or something, you know we told a joke too dirty or we've offended Scott. This webcam, it that does not flatter me. Let's do that. It long-time listener, holy cow, Farmer Schneck. It I appreciate the conversations on the wheat and learning a lot from you there. I don't know what to talk about tonight, guys. You guys tell me. Yes, Midwest Dallas Acres. This is the same backdrop as my OnlyFans dungeon, but we cleaned it up to use it for the live feed on YouTube tonight. Adam's a new subscriber. Yes, you were the one that for the hydraulic pump, I think. Yeah, Rihanna. Jordy, holy cow. 10, 12 years ago, we had a lot of funny things to say about that, but now it just MGS. Thank you very much. I was nervous. I was really Alex, you're out there. Good to see you. I enjoy trying to converse with Alex, and I try to watch his stuff the best I can. And there is the language barrier. He tries to do a good job of always subtitling for me, but or not for me. He always tries to do a good job of subtitling. But yeah, he had a live stream tonight. The Dutch language. It sounds so funny because it sounds so much in your throat, Alex. Your natural language. But no, Alex, glad you're here. Hope it's one of many. Yes. I've always thought of doing this. I just was always nervous, to be honest with you. Always kind of nervous. It's one thing to do the camera, like we all do. It's another thing to go live. But yeah, grow the farm up. How would you do a poll? That you guys would have to walk me through that one, on how to do a poll. But that's a good idea. Have I put in an order for a Massey Utility Series yet? No, we have not. But funny you say that, because we're getting the $75,000 4430 is getting underway, so I'll have videos for that project soon. But the Massey dealer did call for a BS session, and I like the one salesman out there because he's into strip till and trying to learn how to do strip till and some cover cropping down by his area. And his area is a big part of it. Don't work here. And so it's fun to have conversations with him. But they did get Oh, Alex, you're calving now. Okay, good luck. Good luck. We'll chat again. Happy calving. Um, and they do have a 5S. And I'll tell you what, since that little 5S, since they have the brake to neutral feature, it would almost allow you to run it really close to the CVT that's in the Big Massey now, where it's like driving a forklift, where you just push the pedal, like Brad, you got that LS, with the hydro, it'd be almost like that, to where you just step on the brakes, it stops. Karen can set the bales down and do what she wants to do. A neat little tractor. But we're just going to hold tight for the next couple of years, get through this transition of me and the wife quitting our jobs and trying to learn how to take over the business from Dad and kick him into retirement sometime. He'll never retire. I hope he never retires, because I don't know what on earth I'm going to do without him. But yeah, we're gonna try and figure that out. So no purchasing this year. Scott, we did 180 miles yesterday on the new snowmobile. So Scott Olson asked how many miles are on the new sled. And yeah, we did 180 miles yesterday. And these new sleds are amazing. We had a late start because there was a nasty accident on the trail. The dude, I last we heard, he's in ICU. Don't know if he's going to live. 30 seconds ago, it was a husband and wife going down the trail. And in a blink of an eye, you got a potential widow. And it's sad. Like that bothered me. Like he hit hard enough that they just put his helmet into a little bag. It just shatters all his ribs broken, liver tore open, and ankle broke, collar. But so we rode a little slow. Until we kind of settled our nerves from that one. And yeah, 180 miles. That was fantastic. These new sleds, like we got lost because the trails were closed because the groomers couldn't even get through some of the trails yet. And so we ended up backtracking and whatnot. So it was 3:00. We had lunch, and then at lunch we're like, oh, well, let's take this route to go home. Rocky Rung, how you doing, Fretton? Grow the Farm Up. He said, what do you guys do with your high yielding corn stubble? Disc it, strip till, no till. Have a hard time no tilling into beans and 250 plus bushel corn stubble. Brad, I don't know what 250 bushel corn stubble is going to look like. But yeah, that I think that's a regional thing. Here, I just got to say, even when we get some pretty high tonnage corn stubble, even if we don't have the yield there. And the first couple of years of getting into no-till, all the experts about no-till that have never done no-till was telling me how we're going to have to plow every couple of years, because otherwise you're just going to have this buildup of trash on top of the soil. And after a couple of years, like we hit, Brad Larson, the other Brad, has talked about it a lot too, that in our season here, the ground's frozen 6 months out of the year. There's not much soil life. So all of our residue breakdown is going to be in July and August. And it was really amazing that in the spring, your no-till planting and the trash whips, just all this fluff and stuff. And you're like, holy crap, look at all that. And then come August, other than cobs and big chunks of stock, it's gone. I usually split for us while I'm transitioning. I took a tile probe and shoved it down the corn root, and right there, that tile probe went through, where if you went and split the 30-inch, the ground was still pretty compacted there, in our transitioning soils. So, and then also to eliminate tire stubble damage on the Massey or even the 4640, I didn't run on last year's rows. I just hugged them. So like one wheel of the trash whip was kind of just glancing off that corn stump. I didn't want to knock that root out of the ground and end up with a mess. The only problem we had the first couple of years was the row cleaners were a little aggressive because my first set of row cleaners was rigid mounted. And so on the flat, you got heavy, hard soil. And on the top, on the slopes, you had softer soil. And so you'd set the row cleaners down here, and then you start going up the slope, and you'd see them plowing a little bit. And then the next rain, that lighter soil would wash over the row and bury them seeds an extra inch or two. And it made for some not so pretty stands. But then we got the floating row cleaners, the Mieter Chartreuse, and that really helped a lot. Farmer Snake, you're saying, Adam, we do the GMO right now, Roundup Ready corn. I do want to get into non-GMO after listening to some soil health presenters because of Brix readings and potential health, plant health stuff there. But for right now, I'm cheating and using the GMO stuff just to get me through. The seed beans last year were non-GMO. Farmer Schneck, you had said 15 inches. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. You said 15 inches. I did a lot of custom acres one fall. Well, every fall. And that one fall was, it was everywhere from 30 inch at low pop to high pop. Different fertility plans, different hybrids, different companies, different planting dates. And then we had one guy even just blew the beans out, the broadcast spreader, and chased it with a field cultivator. And after doing 800 acres of custom work across all different soil types in my neighborhood, there was not one definitive thing that stood out. But the guys that did, so we're either drilled, so 7.5 would be our drill options for anybody drilling around in my neighborhood, or 30s. There is one 20-inch guy, but the combining of the drilled beans was phenomenal. They fed in so much nicer. I mean, you picked up like a mile and a half an hour. Brad, you need bean meters? Brad Larson, have I got a deal for you? Aaron, good day. Brad Larson, have I got a deal for you? I have VSET meters with the vacuum and like new 1 bushel boxes. So that would give you your precision corn plate and your precision soybean plate. There's a lot of university studies out there saying that precision spacing on soybeans can result in yield advantage. But the biggest thing I noticed on my old 7000 going from that dribble cup, remember that plastic dribble cup on the 7000s where it just kind of was literally just a cup, and it had there wasn't much left in there. The wife can clean the carpet. It was just that drilled cup with just them notches, and it was a controlled spill. I would sell that at a heck of a deal, just to see it go into somebody's good hands. And yeah. If that's something that you want, your 7400 and 6400 would very easily run that vacuum fan because you got the priority, the pressure compensating hydraulic systems on them. The only thing you'd need to pick up is from like the old 7200 John Deere's, that needle valve that you'd shut down for the flow. But yours, depending on the option of your hydraulic valves, and you might have enough adjustment flow on your hydraulic valves right there, but you just turn it up to 20 pounds, just drive. Ontario, Farmer Schneck, you said 2 bushels from 30 to 15s. DLK, hey, how are you doing? It the 2 bushel advantage on 30s to 15s. I wonder because of your I wonder why. I guess is it because of just spacing and singulation and sunlight, or is it from your soil? Is it a population thing, or that'd be curious to see. Um, DLK, hey, the weather's been amazing. Yes, yes. I'm glad to hear that you guys had good weather too. Um, this really took a beating on our snowmobile season. Wah, wah, wah. The snow I think is going to go fast. Although I did have the Massey, we went off trail the other day, Karen and I, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "You're just driving through the pasture just to see how much snow you can go through." And I'm like, "Yep, yep." Grow the farm up. Before the pandemic, I was almost exclusively non-GMO special. 80% of the companies went out of business. Post-pandemic, people just want shelves full. Ooh, you'll have to talk more on that, Brad. That I would love to do with Grow the Farm Up. So if you guys don't know, Brad is a seed. He grows seed. That's been his business for quite a long time. And I don't know if you were second generation, Brad, but I'd love to do a meeting with Brad somehow, like on a meeting like this where we could interview Brad, because there's a lot of stuff. And so I'd be curious what your thoughts are as to what. So the one presenter said that Brix readings in GMO crops can't get high enough like the non-GMO stuff. And the Brix readings are how the level of the plant of sugar and function inside. And when it gets to a point that, like let's say a Brix reading of 11, they were saying that's when the plant can fight off pests. And then if you get to like a 14 is when the plant can naturally fight off your Phytophthora and other fungi. I hope I murdered that pronunciation a little bit, but and other fungal issues. And so I'd be curious, Brad, what your opinion is on that. Brent Erickson, evening. Yes, lots of snow up north. Oh, Brett, I never did finish. You guys got me off topic. Scott, yeah, I'm getting close to 2,000 miles on the sled already. Haven't got to ride much this year. Believe it or not, we've had the best snow in a long time. EAB, he got 1,200 miles on the sled already. Wow, if you need more cows. You need more cow. You got 1,200 miles. It's been a great year, though. It's been a really great year for that riding. Avery, have you been strip tilling your beans and banning fertilizer? If so, have you seen a yield bump with this practice? So part of my problem is there was still enough in my brain of it don't work here kind of stuff. But I did. So I have the excuse when I always was stagnant on yield to be like, well, it's just my territory. But now I'm kind of learning a lot more in those last few years. What I did on strip tilling, the first years when we started doing strip tilling, I did strip till versus no till versus conventional till, high pop, low pop, and some spacing stuff. And then with each program, yeah, Brad, beans are stupid. You do all them different things, and then with each one, I had different fertility levels with them, and I thought I'm trying to read there. You guys, I got to focus on my thoughts here. I did different fertility levels with each one as well to see if it was the tillage program or if it was the fertility. So I did no till, strip till, conventional till with no fertilizer, and then with a normal soybean program, and saw no significant yield difference between any one of them. Then we get into population, and I went um, down to 55,000, and that it um, down to 55,000 or something, and didn't see pods per evening check, or good evening, Crane and Rigger. Pods per yield check, from 55,000 to 115,000. Didn't see a whole lot, and yeah, calm down, EAV. It was a joke. Pretty sure I got more cows than you. Done growing the herd, you're gonna hang around 40 or so. That's a nice number. The wife asked, how far are we going to go? And Farming at 4G's dad one time said something I thought was kind of funny. He's like, well, if you can do 50, you can do 100. And then if you can do 100, you might as well do 150 because you don't have to buy any more equipment. And if you're at 150, well, then you might as well just do 200 for a nice even number. And so when the wife asked me how many cows we're going to get to, that's what I had. That's what I had said. Like, well, we might as well just go to 200. And this spring we'll have 24 calving, but then we'll also have 8. I think we got 5. Then we'll have 5 replacement heifers coming up, and then 12 after that. And then so in a couple of years, it'll only take a few years. Michael Jackson versus Whitney Houston. Michael is so overrated. So overrated. Yeah, Brad, the drilling the beans, that spilled cup. I think at the time when I switched to the ESET bean meters, I thought just in the seed savings alone, almost paid the couple $100 for the seed meters. Pioneer had a program. So again, Brad at Grow the Farm Up, correct me if I'm wrong, but Pioneer does a horrible job on separating seed by weight. And so rumor was that they invested into the precision ESET meters so they could sell better seed or make their seed look better. That was a rumor. I don't know how true that is, but it worked because on my air meter or any meter that's sensitive to seed weight, the Pioneer seed was horribly inaccurate. And then when I dump in a DeKalb or Peterson or anybody else, the singulation would go really well. Treasure Haven Farms, Ike, how you doing? The baleage and the wrapper. Loved it. Last summer, we went to pick up the wrapper. Karen happened to be home that day, and I did not plan on that. Full disclosure. And so that was a normal car ride over there. And then we picked up the wrapper, and before I could get to the salesman to get the paperwork, he handed it to Karen. So that was a quiet ride home of how am I going to pay for that? But I'm just kidding. but it, yeah, it was one of them things that had to be done. Absolutely 100%. We will be wrapping everything again next year. Because the loss, I mean, when a bale is sitting there in the sun, the wrap was the cheapest building I could put up for now, because when that bale is sitting there in the sun, every time it gets rained on, you lose a percentage of the bale. As it sits there in the soil, you lose a percentage of the bale. Come to wintertime, it's froze to the ground. You stab and lift up, you lose, 40, 50, 80 pounds of bale down there. And then you got that outer shell, and then your twine or your net wrap has been melted into that hay. That baleage, it allows us to get off the field faster, have a better quality product. And there's a lot of university data showing that your second cutting, especially like alfalfa, you get that hay cut, baled, wrapped, and off the field. Versus, there's been times trying to make dry hay, you'll have it up there that 10, 14 days, and you rake it 3 times because it's so humid. You're trying to make a dry bale out of it. That next crop is already trying to regrow, and you're running it down. It's already greened up, and you're out there moving bales off the field. So the universities are saying, you could easily get 5 to 10% better tonnage off the next one by timely wrapping. And so even our dry hay, Adam, how big can you make the dry bales you wrap? 4 feet wide is the only width that it goes. We did did I do 72 inch? I think I did 72 inch. I can do the 72 inch for like the dry straw. The baleage, the wet bales, the wet bales, we try to shoot for like that 54 inches. One, because of weight, and 2, it seems easier to feed more small bales. We bale graze the wet feed. And they clean that up amazing. They really, I'm impressed and happy how much they clean up a bale. We don't push them to clean up though either. If you look at the condition of our cows, we are obviously investing in the cows. There's no doubt about that. But we don't push them to make sure they clean up every scrap. But yeah, the dry bales, there's some dry hay out there that on paper it looks like crap, like it's horse hay, like 11%, 10 or 11% protein and not much feed to it. But the cows just love it. And so Avery, he said the same thing. It's cheaper to wrap than to put up bales or put up a building. And yeah, for now it is. If we ever got, I like the wrapping. I just like it. How many bales on the baler? Oh boy, now you're making me think. Are we getting close to 3,000, or did we break 3,000? I like the auto dump cycle. And the kick bar, especially for like dad's getting older and sometimes forgets some stuff. And then especially for like my brother or the wife that are learning how to bale, it just beep and says stop on the monitor. So you just take your foot off the pedal on the Massey, and then it does its thing. And the kick bar slows the cycle time down. So if I had a ramp on the back, I think it'd be like a 4-second cycle time, just and done. But with the kick bar, it adds, oh my God, an eternity, like 15 or 20 seconds of extra time. But with the wife and the brother trying to learn how to bale, I think it adds a level of safety of having a bale roll back under the gate. And then if it bumps something, if the gate's coming down and it bumps the bale, then it just stops everything, and it's just like object in the way. And then you got to like for us, that we run the baler all the time, you guys and I, you're familiar with your baler, you know how to redo the monitor and things like that. But if you're teaching somebody how, it's a little finished. So for first time people, that's where I should just buy a new Fendt. Then the auto cycle. We were up at Breckenridge setting up the auto headland turnaround on a new 743, the 2-track tractor. And so it was kind of fun that we made an imaginary implement and a boundary and everything, and you just drive the tractor, and on that very first turn on the headland, you tell it to make a left-hand turn, and it came up and whoop, made a left-hand turn. Then you could decide whether you wanted to skip passes or not. And it was kind of fun setting that up. And I was telling the AGCO engineer, I'm like, God, I got that auto baler. Why don't we incorporate that into the tractor? So when it says stop, it stops the tractor as well. And so if they haven't released that in the new software on the Fendt, it's going to be out very soon, I would imagine. Maybe there's not enough demand for it. It's the tractor would be capable. It'd just be a software thing, but that'd be sweet. When the baler's ready to dump, it just automatically brakes the tractor. It just automatic dump, reset, and then you just got to flip your on the Fendt. It's not a left-hand reverse lever. It's just a little tiny switch there. So you just have to touch it back forward to resume. Yeah. I wonder if that would help me get a Fendt through the wife. Farmer Schnick, you use the automatic headland turnaround? $42 people. Yeah, this is kind of cool. Yeah, this is kind of fun. We should do more of this stuff. Yeah, John Deere. It is yeah, they had the auto stop. Yep. And they had, John Deere had the auto headland turnaround a little bit earlier. I don't know who had the automatic headland management first. I remember John Deere in the late 90s came with the auto headland for headland management, so you could run a number of things. But I don't know if they copied that from Fendt. It seems like John Deere, ever since Fendt in 96 came with the CVT, John Deere was playing catch up. Farmer Schneck, yes, it works A1. Cool. That's neat to hear. It was kind of fun to be on a project like that and to get it working. That's when we were doing the Momentum Planter too. The Momentum Planter just came out, and we were up at Breckenridge trying. That's when I did that video with that guy from AGCO, and then we ended up selling a few of them, and it went pretty good, sort of. Can I just hit the like button myself a bunch of times to help the algorithm? The price of the wrapper is why I got a cheap ag bagger. So you are pushing your bales through an ag bag? Yeah, the New Holland, they've had that headland too. And I had a guy just south of St. Cloud, super nice guy. Yeah, we're competing against the Super Bowl here, Scott. That's pretty good. We had the headland management. We had a guy come in, and I was at an event show with the Fendt, and so all the salespeople are over there, with their pretty little polo shirts and their sunglasses and fancy boat shoes, and just having their high climb. And I had some guys walking around that Fendt tractor, and we just had a ball. And I spent about 40 minutes with the guy, and spent about 40 minutes just showing features. And every time I pointed out a feature, like, yeah, here's how our CVT works. He's like, that's what my New Holland has. And I'm like, yeah, well, here's how, this works. And here's how our headland management. He's like, yep, I got all that stuff on my New Holland. I'm like, okay. So he finally called for a demo, and sales department called. They're like, hey, help us do this demo. And he was a manure hauler too. And so we went out, we let him have it for tillage for a couple days, and went back out there one morning just to check on him. And he's like, you know what? I'm not really, it's impressive machine on the tillage, but I'm not really seeing any advantage over my other tractors. Like, the engine management was cool. The amount of fuel that it used was impressive, but he's like, it's not enough to switch tractors. And I said, well, let's set you up on the manure spreader. And so we set it up for the manure spreader. So while he was milking cows, he's like, well, here's the scale, because he used a scale to run the manure spreader. He's like, can you figure out how to install this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I just went to my truck, and on the fence there was a ports in the roof, and I had the adapter cables in my truck, and so I just plugged it into the GPS and power out of the cab, and hooked up his hydraulics, and just kind of rough set his speeds. And so then when we pulled into the field, he just hit the go button. It caught the guidance line, set the speed at like 4.5 miles an hour, brought engine up to PTO, turned the PTO on, opened the spreader, turned on the floor, and you just held the reverser until the manure came out the beaters, and then you let go or hit the go again, and your miles per hour took off. And then when you got done, when the manure spreader was empty, you hit end, and it shut everything down, let engine go back to engine management, and shot the miles an hour to like 12 miles an hour. And then when you turned onto the road, you just tromped the foot pedal and 34 miles an hour. And he was just like, holy damn, now you're doing a demo. And I said, well, what do you think about this headland management? Because on the monitor, I set up a jump screen for him, a quick jump. So he didn't have to go back a couple pages. He just hit the quick jump page, and it took him right to the headland management so he could edit it. And he's like, I don't know. I never got the trailer brakes to work on the New Holland. I never got the headland management to work. All the other functions that were supposed to be there. Now, after the demo, he's like, yeah, I couldn't do work, but he busted my balls. Oh, he made me sweat for days on that demo. The 1000 series, them are expensive, but they're gorgeous. And they run on such cheap fuel. We had a farmer out of Atwater, had 3 of them on the big tubby spreaders, the big German things. They could hold a semi-load at a time. And he drove them from Minnesota, Missouri, because each tractor was a semi-haul, and each manure spreader was a semi-haul. So it would have been 6 trips with the semi, and it was a 10-hour drive from doorstep to doorstep because they went 34 on the road. And so it was a 10-hour drive with the tractors. And I think on that 1000 series, he had the 1042s, the 420 horse. He had the yellow Challenger version, not the Fendt. Same tractor, just different cab stuff. I think by the time he had 600 or 700 hours on there, the lifetime fuel usage was like 6 gallons an hour, and the def was like a half or 3/4 of a gallon. Like how do you run a tractor on so little fuel? Brad, the dirty little secret about the seed industry is we're selling about the same 25 varieties. It's just a matter of what color bag you want in your seed. I did get to talk to the breeder at Peterson Seeds. You know, you call these companies up and you just remind them who you are. And you know who this is. And they're like, no, please tell me. And you're like, oh. Wah, wah, wah. And no, I met Mike before. Super nice guy. And I told him I want to try a high yielding seed plot over here because nobody's ever done it. Like I've never heard anybody trying to do a high yield plot. So I was telling him some of the things I want to try. And he's like, interesting. Because he's broke 500 bushel up there in North Dakota before. And so I'm like, well, if he can do that in North Dakota, then I should at least, can we break 300 here? Could we get close to 400? I don't know. I'm excited because Farmer Schneck. So if you guys haven't seen Farmer Schneck, check him out on Facebook and YouTube or wherever he hangs out the most. He was telling me about wheat and that we're missing a good potential opportunity here. So I'm going to put in a test plot for the wheat and the soybeans as well, a high yield plot for each one, or a high management plot for each one. Where the yield goes, we don't know, but I want to test different management practices or type stuff to see because of our climate, because of our soils, our region, things like that, does some of that stuff make a bigger impact? You know what I mean? On the soybean things, was it Adam or one of you guys asked about the fertility plot? I did corn fertilizer program under the soybeans. And so in the soybean, in the strip till of the soybeans, I had a couple hundred pounds of urea, 100 of AMS, and then it would have been a couple hundred pounds of 92330. And the beans still nodulated, but they were way ahead. So that was in 15 or 16. I was 16, and we had a phenomenal fall. But in August, the beans were way ahead of the other beans that didn't get it. So since the fall carried on forever and we were waiting for a killing frost, everything they were only 10 or 12 bushel above the rest of the beans. But that's the first time I had a little field go, over 60 bushel. And then, but since they were so far ahead, had we had an earlier frost, I bet the yield would have been not exponential, but way, because the bean development was so much further ahead. I think had we had a normal, mid-September frost, I think you would have seen a substantial thing. Larson Valley Farms, Brad, local seed dealer is trying to get me started with winter wheat. He has a local market for it and needs more growers. If you absolutely give it a try, especially with your cattle. I mean, we're both in that similar situation. So one thing Farmer Schneck told me to go to was, oh crap, what's the channel? Real Agriculture. Brad Larson, go to realagriculture.com or on YouTube, and they got a lot of winter wheat schooling, and I liked a lot of it because at Wheat Pete brought a lot of common sense to it. Like, in the springtime, look at where things are at, count your tillers, and determine a nitrogen program. It was really interesting. Shane Holtz, holy cow, Shane Holtz, he's there. Well, you're just getting into your evening break, and yeah, you only got 22 more hours to finish off your Sunday's work, huh, Shane? That this always working. Mad Cow. I heard that name. So I don't know if you know this, Shane. That used to be my name back in the snowmobile world. Back in before YouTube, we had forums, and yeah, Mad Cow. That was when I was racing snowmobiles back then. It was kind of fun. We had a showroom stock sled. And we were doing 108, 110 miles an hour and 1,000 feet. And all these big talkers on the MJR Farms. How are you doing? We were doing 108, 110 miles an hour. Even hit 113 with the stalker. And at that time, the world record was 114. And so I thought we were doing pretty good. And all these big talkers. Well, there's Rudy Jensen. He's going to love snowmobile talk. There's a parts guy. If you ever just want to hammer on a parts guy, hammer on Rudy. And all these big talkers on the internet back then were they were only doing 104 miles per hour and 1,000 feet. And here we are with a Bowen stock sled. I remember at the time, Hot to Go had a shim kit, pipes, heads. They had this $1,500 or $1,700 package for the 800 XDR, and there was 2 or 3 of them at Rush Lake right next to us, and they were running 107 miles an hour. And we had our Bowen stock, showroom stock, ISR legal. Still had from inspection, they would put fingernail paint on your head bolts, and to make sure you didn't crack your engine open. And here we were doing 100. I think we were right around 109, 110 that day at Rush City. And them other XCR guys are just walking around like, how much porting and pipe work? And you're like, I'm bone stock. And they're just like, what? Yeah, good times. Rudy Jensen, you're ice racing. You and your brother ice race. Them vintage ovals, roundy rounds. He's making a left turn. He coming up on another left turn. 4850. Oh no, Shane. MJR has a 4850 hydraulics question. Back Farms, how you doing? Go ahead, MJR. Throw your question out there. Let's see if we can keep this thing going. We'll give him a few seconds to throw out a hydraulic question. Dear God, please don't have a 3-point problem. Dear God, no. Now I'm nervous. What's he gonna say? Doody 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 doody. Crane and Riga got up to 35 on his 78 Suzuki. Karen was a good trail rider when we were dating. You know how fun women were when you were dating. And so she was a good trail rider. She rode my XLT, and I had an XC600 then. And then when I got the 800 XCRs, I'm like, well, she can learn how to drive. She can learn how to race. And we went out to the race, and I set it. I'm like, okay, you just punch it, hold it wide open until you pass me. And and literally like at 30 miles an hour, come down the track. And I'm like, oh, what happened? And she's like, nothing. I'm like, okay. This time, try holding it all. And Mark, good evening. And so I should hold it longer. And well, and she kept letting off. I'm like, what's happening? She's like, well, I'm scared. I'm like, oh, okay. Because at that time, that stock 800, you probably only had maybe one G-force of launch on you. And Chris Farley, that out on Rushland, everybody went through. No, we were when everybody fell through. No, but what year was it? It was 50 degrees. Paul was still with me. It was before Mike came along, so it had to be, would that have been like 05, 06, 07, somewhere in there? The DNR drills holes through the ice to allow a permit to hold an event on the ice, and the water was coming out of them ice holes about that high. I can remember it being like 50 or 55 degrees. You literally had to use your snow. You could not walk from the pits to the starting line, and the water was so deep. The exhaust on them old sleds would be underwater and bubbling water. And I was in the back. I had the barbecue grill in the back of the pickup back then, and we were actually grilling out there that day. It was awesome. But Jenny did crash. She had a Rupp. I don't remember the year. She had a Rupp 440, about the most beautiful. Daryl and Jenny had. She was the sweetest little gal, and they had just some of the cleanest restored vintage sleds. And she went through the traps at 92 miles an hour on that Rupp 440. Amazing speed for a vintage sled. And she hit that puddle of water and hydroplaned. And then on a snowmobile, if you hydroplane flat, they'll go sideways on you. And it went sideways, and then it catches the water and it tumbled her. And so then they tried plowing the track because there was a dip in the ice at the finish line. That's where the water, and they took pickups and plowed the water off. But we ended up, as racers, we're just like, nope, we're done for the day. Chris Farley, Egg Webb. Thanks for that, Shane. Egg Webb. Chris from Successful Farming, Egg Webb, he wrote me a fake bio to send out to the places that want my bio. And part of it was like a Chris Farley meets Boris Johnson. Oh, MJ Farms, your 4850 keeps shearing off the bolts that hold the relief block on the side of the bell housing. Comes off the hydraulic pump. So that would be your priority valve. So where that line from the pump comes into that housing, behind that fitting is a spring and a valve, and then it drops down. I'm trying to picture it in my head. It should drop down, and then the big line will go up to your top of your 3-point valve up there on the plumbing. It'll be in front. If you're standing at the back of the tractor, it'll come in front of that valve and kind of tucked away up there under the cab. And then off the top, it should have your lines then that go to your steering and brakes. But it does have a fitting that goes, so if it can return to sump, it goes right back into that PTO gear. That's that big casting, that big bell of casting in there. And it pushes right back into there. There is a pressure port, a DR port on there. You can check pressure there to make sure that that valve is functioning. But I would pull that valve out. If you take the pipe off, kind of pain in the butt, but you can take the pipe off from the main pump, kind of flex things around with the bolts off, get the fitting off the front, and pull that spool valve and spring and make sure that they're all nice. Yep, the attenuator is right there. Yep, that attenuator is right there. And then from it goes up to the attenuator, and the attenuator is a hydraulic muffler. And then out of the attenuator, that's where your steering and brakes go. But yeah, there is a little bit of plumbing there. So I wonder if it's shearing, like literally shearing the bolts off. The other thing I would do is that might be an issue that's the victim and not the culprit. I would put a gauge, get a 0 to 3,000 gauge and put in the hydraulic outlet in the back. Just get a Pioneer tip with some bushings. And so it does have, okay, that's where I'm going. It has a bad vibration. Even though you replace the hydraulic pump. So I'd put a gauge in that line, in a valve in the back, one of your hydraulic outlets, and watch that gauge. If you use a liquid filled gauge, that needle should just sit, 2250, 2500, wherever it's at. And but if that gauge is just bouncing, then we've probably got a problem with the new hydraulic pump, or we've got a valve somewhere else that's causing that bounce and vibration. And so, yeah, that would be an interesting one. Is the vibration in the steel line coming from the pump, or is it in the steel line after that valve? Yeah, crane and rigging, 2-cycle power band spooks me every time. Yeah, on the I really like MG replies, gives us more information. The 1000cc build was fun. I was nervous about that one because I thought, man, if you get 1000cc, is it going to have just kind of a whoa hit to it, that you can't ride? And so you're only making 240 horse, natural, no turbo or nitrous or nothing. So you're only making 240 on that 1000cc, and that one does not hit. There is no peak. That one, we usually pull about a G-force and a half on the starting line if you don't just murder the throttle. There is no coming on. It just, and you gotta tighten your butt cheeks because it's pushing your gut, trying to push your gut out your rear end. And then you get tunnel vision. It's kind of cool because when you launch, like, and so that one usually ran when my buddy at 180 pounds ran it. when he ran it at 180 pounds, it usually had a zero. Was it zero? The 60 foot was usually about a second and a half, and 0 to 60 miles an hour was like 1.7 seconds. And at 1.5 G forces. But even when I rode it, you'd watch when you leave the line, you can see the edge, and then somewhere right around at 330 feet, we're right around, is where we usually hit 100 miles an hour, and your vision starts to come together. And around 120, 130, you had a pretty you don't remember seeing anything of peripheral visions. The front bump. From the front pump, it's vibrating, but both pumps have done the exact same thing, even swapped the block, and it's still doing it. Yeah. So then we got another problem to look at. And so if it's one thing to have one pump go bad, but two pumps to be bad and still have the same issues, pretty rare. Swap the block and it's still doing it. Same theory, that two bad blocks. So something else. So I would look after that. Then we got to start looking, does the 3-point settle rather quickly overnight? Feel for any hot spots up on that flow control valve. Is the big pipe that comes off the top of the 3-point, kind of around where the top of the piston of your 3-point is, and then the sheet metal work for the seat is right there, and there's that big pipe that goes over there, and check that pipe for heat. And then down in front of that valving, you can check that valving and the 3-point valving, your SCVs, for heat. There's that plug right below. You get your PTO and your right SCV, and just down a little bit, you've got a square drive plug, a 1/2-inch square drive plug. Pop that thing out. See if you got oil spraying around in there, kind of stuff. Scott Olson, you got a 100-pound driver with no fear. That would be interesting. You put Casey on there. You'd have to put him on there and then take duct tape and wrap his hands up to keep him on the sled. He'd be like flapping in the wind. It actually goes really nice down the track for I built the chromoly. I learned how to weld chromoly on that project. An old timer at the construction, he told me, like, yeah, the secrets of chromoly is post heat. And I'm like, oh, interesting. You got to anneal the welds. And so what I did is welded some chromoly in the vise. And if you didn't anneal it, you could take the maul and just smack that piece of pipe and it would crack like a sheet of glass right along that edge. And then I heated it up and then dunked it in the in some oil, and then I could just flatten that thing. And then you're weld. So I learned how to weld chromoly. So I built the rear skid on that 1000 and and the front skid, the trailing arms and everything, and use some bicycle, like your pedal bikes. They got them little shocks. I use them little shocks to support the weight on there and stuff. And yeah, that was kind of a fun project. I'm surprised, to be honest. I'm surprised that rear end hasn't been sucked underneath the machine. I thought for sure it would have broke by now, but that's been under there for years. It 100-pound rider. At a 180-pound rider, we're right at 129 and 1,000 feet, 134 and a quarter. I know the 4-strokes are amazing. They're getting them up to, you can do 320 trail. Yep. Pump gas. They're getting close to 320 horse on pump gas, but them heavy pigs, you kind of need it. We raced some guys, and that wasn't too many years ago, and they were all that 320, 340 tune. Impressive looking machine. I mean, they had studs like my dang pinky, hundreds of them. They were set up for 660. but I was not. I never really set up for 660 very much. And some guys are like, "Yeah, come on down and have some fun. We're gonna do some top end runs on the lake." And I'm like, "Yep, that's what I'm set up for, salt flat kind of work." And these guys unloaded these sleds, and I'm like, "You're not going very fast with that kind of stuff. You got 25, 35 pounds of iron in your track. Like, you are not going fast." And and they're like, "We're set up for 660." And I'm like, "Nobody told me that." They're like, "Yeah, we all called last night. We had a meeting that we're just going to do 660s." And I'm like, "Oh, crap." And, but we still snuck them. We still snuck them when they left the line. I mean, they were up in the air, just violent power. Just like, oh my God, they even had the starter button, build and boost, like a tractor puller. You need to build that boost. And they took off, and my sled leaves the line. But if you're going up, you're not going forward. And yeah, but we snuck by a few of them. That was pretty entertaining. That was it. We had a stock, so I ported an 800 XCR for a guy. On paper, he should have got his butt kicked. You had a 500. I think they had a claimed dry weight of 550 pounds and stock horsepower of 155. And the new sleds at that time were 155, 160 on them 800 twins. And I mean, they were, well under 500 pounds. You're 400, almost 100-pound lighter claimed weight. But so I ported that, but he had stock carbs, stock pipes, and did 106 and 660 and just murdered them new sleds. Just murdered them. I was like, holy dang, that was pretty interesting. Yeah, the 86 octane and the new stuff. MJR, you said the 3-point will stay up for a day or better. I would start feeling around on that tractor. I would start feeling for hot spots and seeing what you can find. That is a good one. Yeah, the old tractors on ethanol. Is there an old guy watching here? Any old guys watching that can answer that? Or Midwest Alice and Dustin Adams, you guys, Midwest Alice, you know all that old stuff. For a young enthusiast, I thought on the old things, weren't they called all fuels? Because they could run them old tractors. Couldn't they run pretty much anything? I don't remember the specs on them. Yeah, it takes a lot of studs. We never ran the trail studs. The trail studs were too heavy with the carbide, and somebody track dynoed at one time, and I can't remember. I thought it was Hanson Racing engine, or not Hanson Racing engines. Anderson chassis. They track dynoed different tracks, and was it every quarter inch or half inch of lug height was like 5 or 10 horsepower. It was because you're churning air. But then they got the new, now you can sharpen your trail studs. You can, that is amazing to sharpen your trail studs. We always just ran the quick picks, but on tar, yeah, it'd be neat. I always thought about doing tar. We just never, with the farm and working off the farm, we just never had time, but I would like to. There was a couple teams we raced with that would show up to the radar runs that every year they came from the farms. I seen MJ. They came from the asphalt world. So they just raced year round, and every year they came out to the ice. You could just see it, that they were just walking away from the rest of the pack, as weekend warriors, that if it's a good snow year, you didn't race that year. And then a couple of years later, you come back. Then you could see that they just boom, 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 moved way up because they were just always getting better. Distilleries It distillates. That's what they call them in the old trailer. Shane Holtz is going to get back to chores. I didn't think you would have quit. Slacker. What if you get in trouble for slacking off? It no, take care, Shane. Be safe. And yeah, thank you very much for stopping by. I don't know what else to talk about. That's it. That's my whole life. That's everything I've ever known. You guys got to throw something at me, otherwise I tend to ramble. I don't know. It kind of weird. I do have on, what the heck day are we? Monday's the 13th. So Wednesday or Thursday? Wednesday or Thursday, the 15th, I go to Wisconsin to add my 5 minutes of commentary to an event. And then, but I don't know what that, I'm excited for that one because there's a guy over there. I'm well-rounded. You can't tell that. I got the camera on my face. Well, okay, you can see it on my chin. I've put on a little weight. I got to get back to carrying concrete and wrestle piling. It on the 23rd, I get to go to Iowa. They called, and ever been around Rotax engines? I didn't really get to work on them a whole lot, but I understood I remember the theory of them. The early Rotax, they actually had kind of like a little flywheel that went in front of the intake, where the other snowmobiles were either a piston port or a reed, and the reed would open when the engine sucked and closed when the piston came back down. And you had that Rotax, so it was like a little flywheel timed to the crankshaft. So when the piston came down, it rotated and shut that port. Farming in 4G. I told you to send me a text. I don't know if you got that message. Shoot me a text. Because Brent and Farming at 4G, I'll be in North Dakota on the end of March. The end of March. I think it's let me double check. I thought it was March 27th and 28th. 28th, I'll be doing a presentation with Lauren Steinlage. I'll be like the warm-up act for a professional like Lauren. And that'll be kind of fun. So the 27th, I'm heading out early, and I was gonna hit Rocky Run and Farming in 4G up to see if I could swing by or meet them guys somewhere for a visit. MJR Farms, Scott Olson had a good idea. You can use the temp gun, your little laser temp guns for finding hot spots on your hydraulics. Where in Wisconsin is the event? So on the 15th is New Richmond. It's a New Richmond center there. And then on February 23rd is down in Iowa. So they called and asked if I'd do an event down there. And I kind of laughed, like, why me? Like, what? Like, I'm just some knucklehead up here in East Central Minnesota. I'm not like a big corn producer, and they said, you know what? If you can get any of this regenerative to work in your area, there's no excuse for these guys in Iowa. And so that was kind of like, for real? You'd want me? Iowa, that is cripes. I might have to let me do a video on that. I have to look that up. I can't remember. I saved everything in email because in one day 3 different companies called for doing presentations, and so it was kind of a weird day. Very flattered and like, wow, this is kind of cool. But here we go. Maybe this is it. If I can open all these. There's the attached flyer. So it's Alicia she's in the West Union, Iowa part. I can't get the thing to open here. I'll keep working on this. And Rick Clark, one of you guys had asked about Rick Clark. I cannot come to Great Eagle, Rudy. I am sorry. I used to go there religiously. One of you guys asked about Rick Clark. I think what he's doing is pretty cool. I've heard some people try to run him down, and it's a little frustrating because he's just trying to do something different. And Decorah, Iowa there's a college somewhere around Decorah, Iowa. Calmer, Iowa is where it will be. The event will be taking place. Calmer, Iowa. Yep. I'll get a link to that. But Rick Clark, Brad, grow the farm up. It does work everywhere. It's just how do you manage it for your place? And so on the conventional ag forums, there's a lot of guys that try and run them down and be like, oh, that's just a stupid idea and stuff. But it's like, you know what? What if maybe the whole concept don't work for your farm? But it's like anything. Couldn't you take one little thing that he's doing and pull that one little thing out and bring it to your place to make your place better for yourself? I don't know. I thought it was pretty fascinating that he could roll and crimp alfalfa to no-till into for their corn. That I thought was pretty fascinating. I did not know alfalfa would kill that way. But yeah, I think he's got some interesting things going on there. The fact that he's doing it on that many acres and he's still here the next year to talk about it. Maybe he's like us, that behind the camera, you walk around the house like, oh my God, what the heck am I doing? What are we going to do? And then, I think he's got some cool things. I think the couple goofy guys, Brad, grow the farm up. Everything you thought you knew, throw it out the window by year 3 once you start into regenerative. And Mark, how do you survive the transition? Yes. Bust your butt off the farm to support the farm through that transition. That's why I tell everybody, do not jump in like both feet. I'm the kind of guy that sees it and just like plug your nose, jump in the deep end. We'll learn how to swim after we're in the water. And that's why I'm telling everybody, like, if you want to figure this out, just do it. Just do it on a tiny acre. Because once you get it figured out on your farm on 1 acre for 4 or 5 years and start to figure it out, then to take it across your farm is easy to do. And don't just do it on 1 acre on your farm. And then that supports that's how you survive the transition, because you figured it out. But that is the hardest part, and that's why I had them videos on the cover crops. It's like, why should we even do cover crops? We don't get our $30 back. Back Farms must have said something naughty. He had to delete it. You had problems with your roller crimper. I would be curious what problems did you have? I toured one farm, and Lance Klessing, of all people, you look up Lance. What a wonderful human being. And Stock Cropper, yes, the Stock Cropper and Jason Mock. Them are two interesting knuckleheads. That's, oh my gosh, yes. But I got to tour. Lance Klessing had me down there for a soil health event. I didn't do anything. I just showed up. He just invited me down to be a guest. And Mr. Alvaradier, how are you doing? And they had a farm there, and their problem with the roller crimper was that their soil was soft enough that the tractor left ruts, and you had that straight edge. It bridged over the rut, and it wouldn't kill the rye in them ruts. And so they had to come back and use some Roundup to clean it up. And Minnesota Alvaradier up at Hinckley. Oh, Rudy Jensen brings up Marv Jorgensen. What a name drop. That is, what an awesome train of thought, Rudy. Marv Jorgensen. He was a snowmobile runner, and he was like a Don Garlitz that just forward thinking, try some stuff. Very impressive old guy. He had the first Yamaha 4-stroke RX-1 that I watched do over 134 miles an hour and 1,000 feet. It left the line, and you're like, yeah, that's a little bit strong for an RX-1. And all of a sudden, it took off, and you're just like, oh, yeah. And here was a little old man in an old dirty Polaris leather coat, and the sled had a beeper for backup, and beep, 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 and freaking a year later, he's got the thing at like 550 horse, a twin turbo nitrous, just a beast doing 155 and 1,000 feet. Majarius Farms, Cow Calf Days in Mora. That was a fun event. So it was kind of fun. I have to apologize for the guys that were sitting with me. Tony and Jacob, you just can't take them guys anywhere. And then Tyke sitting to the side, the little old guy in the bibs. He thinks he's always funny too, and he is kind of a hoot. And how do you tell an old guy just like when he's dropping some pretty good commentary? But I hope you guys. I like that one. They had a great presentation. So you guys don't know that at Mora, Minnesota, they had a Cow Calf Day event that the extension of Minnesota puts on, and actually had a good lineup of people. Our own Troy Salzer comes down for a little bit of a speak, and they had a gal. I like the gal on the Mineral Talk, and she said something that kind of, it's like, duh. She says, well, every time a cow takes a bite of mineral, she's feeding 3 generations, herself, the calf in utero, and the calf on her side. And you're like, duh. But then you think about it like, wow. And then they followed it up with some data that the universities had tried. And with you other cattle guys, I think it was Ben Vieser on his video, I mentioned it. Like, you can't just, with cattle, how do you just simply do side-by-side trials? We need to rely on the universities on that kind of stuff. It's not like corn where we can just do a couple hundred replicated trials in a year. And so they did a bunch of trials on it. And the cows that had a good mineral program, their heifers had a higher breeding success, and them steers had a higher weaning weight. And that was pretty fascinating. I like that event. I will definitely be going back to the Cow Calf Days thing. That was pretty good. Does this still work? Can you still hear me? Sorry. I'm sorry. I had sugar a little while ago. I like that Cow Calf Days. I will do the thing. Grow the farm up. Just don't roll or crimp. Spray terminate. It can't get too tall. Your planter will plant into crispy dead Just fine. Yeah, yeah. Check out Grow the Farm Up. I mean, obviously, check out everybody on here. But Grow the Farm Up stands out because he comes from the seed grower side of things. So his quality, um, you can't just drive out there with the combine. And I'm surprised he uses John Deere combines, to be honest, out there. STS for that shoddy thrashing system. But compared to the rest of us, with his growing seed, it's a completely different industry. I mean, the corn doesn't go through the combine. The corn, you got them oxbow type things, I would imagine. And we will definitely have another field day this fall, and trying to figure out some more great speakers. For the seed corn, I thought, Brad, you had them oxbow style where they take the whole ear, like they pick it, and then the whole ear goes in for thrashing. But yeah, the seed, that's a whole different world than just us making corn and beans. And so for the fact that he can do regenerative ag for that kind of stuff, I find that very fascinating. Maybe it's just me. But I do find it fascinating from there. And we've talked before that, it kind of goes back to that Gabe Brown thing. Oh, we're cutting into my bedtime. It goes back to that Gabe Brown thing of maybe someday we'll be paid upon quality of seed, not quantity of seed. And when that happens, we're all in a world of hurt, because there's a lot of years American seed does not meet quality for world demand, but they just don't know it. Or they don't know it. They just, you can be as fussy as you want until you can't get any more beans. And then you just got to take the 35% soybeans instead of 37 that you wanted. Yeah. That's enough for me. How about you guys? Rye Carlson, he's a local here. And he's my local hippie contact. I say that with respect, right? Because he is a very smart guy, but he looks like the hippie, and but it's a very smart guy, and he's got a roller crimper here, and it'd be interesting to rent that from him and try some experiments. He's organic, kind of like Treasure Haven Farms. And so Treasure Haven Farms is just a few miles, Farmer Ike, just a few miles south. He does YouTube too. They started sheep, dropping sheep here in the last couple of days. They're organic. So them two guys, it's kind of neat to see the regenerative ag, but they're in such a different world as well. I'd be curious what their thoughts of how they could implement some of that Rick Clark stuff into them. It's almost green in Iowa. What part of Iowa, Mark? Yeah, almost green. Dustin Adams is just in Iowa. Are you still out there, Dustin? I wonder how much snow you guys have. If you're almost green in Iowa, cousin went through Illinois not too long ago, and it was getting pretty thin down there. We were to Precision Planting, kind of an interesting place, the Precision Planting Company, and they host some big events, training events down there, and they got little indoor dirt strips that they can run different products on year round and stuff like that. And I had to laugh because we were down there and overnight up here in Minnesota when we woke up to 28 degrees down there. We weren't very far from like Jake Ziegler and Jeff Raymond. We weren't terribly far from them guys. We woke up and it's like 28 degrees and it was 14 below up here that overnight. And it got up to like 35 or 40 during the day down there. The snowpack was mostly gone, and frozen ground starting to run some water, and they're just blowing on fertilizer like crazy. Like, goofballs. But yeah, let the rye grow tall. So he let the Mark says he let the rye grow tall, planted soybeans, then rolled it. It turned dry and the soybeans didn't get any water. A friend did the same thing. He had to roll the rye 3 times to kill it, heavy clay soils. Yeah, and that goes back to our talk about managing the cover crops. So like the guys in North Dakota on that black muck, they'll variable rate their cover crop rye. And south of Iowa City, we were in Iowa City last year for the Strip Mill Conference. That was a neat area. I like that. Pretty city. So the guys in North Dakota, they variable rate their rye. So in wet spots, they'd pour a lot of seed on. They'd terminate it standing up, so more sunlight could get to the soil. And the guys in Wisconsin, University of Extension of Wisconsin has a YouTube channel. I don't know the name of it. If it's just that, they had a lot of great. There's that lady there, that Erin lady, that does a lot of great organic talk. But in Wisconsin, or like for here, we would roll that rye to get as much straw covering the ground as could be. But yeah, you want it killed before you worry about it stealing any moisture from you. Crow the Farms Up. I put two videos out a month ago showing exactly that, planting into no-till 3-foot tall terminated cover crop, and then showed the emergence of the cover crop. It works for him there. Yeah. Yep. So it works. You just need to figure it out for your own place. All right, guys, don't give up on me yet. Actually, what time is it? 9:16. Oh man, I might have to cut this off. Let's like when I was a dancer, always leave them wanting more. Are you using rye covers in rotation with the wheat and having problems with rye and the wheat? I thought I was going to last year. And so there was a lot of volunteer. Hello from Alabama. Oh, how you doing? Thank you for joining. I thought we were going to have a major problem with the volunteer rye in the wheat. Luckily, we did not. It physically, you could see the rye plant out there because it towered over the wheat, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what the heck?" But it didn't throw any heads. Tom, yeah, it's 10 for you out there. It it didn't throw any heads, luckily. And so, but yes, that is a big concern is cereal following cereal as the volunteer cereal. EAV, no, we don't have milk cows in the morning. We used to, with our construction, when we did the construction work, I always got up with the wife, we always got up at 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then you're just used to being in bed. You're just used to being in bed by 8, 9 o'clock. And there was no farming during the week. When I did road construction, you carried concrete all day. You worked hard, and with driving piling, I lived out of state, trying to rebuild the farm when I was living out of state. So there was no farming then. But yeah, you come home in the evening from carrying concrete, swinging them all day, and then shoveling. But there was no farming in the evening. You'd come home at 8 o'clock at night, and shower and fall asleep. Do it again the next morning. Now hopefully we can start a better schedule. nitrogen tie up with the wheat. Yeah, with the residue. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, that's where I like the strip till for corn on corn. All the locals told me corn on corn will never work here, and you have to incorporate your manure. So of course I did a test plot of corn on corn with the manure, box spread manure on top, your dry lot, pen pack manure. And it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. That was the first test plot we ever had that broke 200. I mean, everybody that year had fantastic test plots, but I don't do show plots. It, um, I don't do show plots. Like, you don't just pick the good spot. Like, I try to pick a spot where we know there's a hill and a swale that's going to kill something somehow, and see what hybrids really survived in that back when we were doing hybrid testing. And yeah, it worked fantastic. But I think that's where the strip till is really cool, because we can tuck that nitrogen in underneath that residue mat, and underneath that residue mat, and hopefully not have any inefficiencies with it. Farmer Ike, we'll see how our rye grows in the spring, then decide what we'll do from there with some of it. We got to plant it pretty late. Yeah, Ike, you had a good job last year. So Ike, Mr. Funny Pants, my oats and barley did not do very good. My wheat was phenomenal, but the oats and barley didn't do good. And Ike always had a funny comment, like, here's a picture of a good wheat field or a good oats field if you're just curious, and like, yeah. Chuckles. Yeah, cover crops are good, but yep, you got to focus on your cash crop. Up there, EAB Farms, you had a ton of corn on corn over there. Yeah, I can imagine it. I think a lot of it is just kind of some closed-minded regionalness that I grew up under. A group of farmers they just lived on it don't work here, and you had a couple people at the co-ops of just like, nope, this is how you have to do it, and blah 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 blah, and everybody just went along. And I remember going into the co-op. I had seen some stuff on Corn College TV actually, and went into the co-op like, yeah, we need to start doing this here. I'd like to start doing some of these practices here. And they're like, yeah, nah, that don't work here. And then when I talked to them about starting strip till, they're like, well, you're going to be deficient on nutrients. And I'm like, how would I be deficient on nutrients? And they're like, well, because on my first strip till machine, I was going to run the urea in the strip, and then because I was originally going to go with liquid strip till machines, and then I was going to broadcast the P and the K, especially the K, because a liquid form of K is just outrageously expensive. And they're like, yeah, that won't work, and you're going to be deficient on P and K. And I'm like, 99% of everything you sell is broadcast P and K. How would it be deficient? Well, because your nitrogen is going to be in strip and your P and K are going to be on the surface. It's like, you're making 0 sense. You're just trying to make up excuses of how to figure out why to use the phrase that don't work here. And now 10 years later, they're going to classes to learn how to do nutrient management and cover crops and stuff. Corn on corn, a consistent yield loss. It'd be curious. I've heard, other guys talk about that before. Other guys talk about corn on corn that they, it's like an automatic 30 to 50 N credits extra that they toss out there. I wonder, it'd be curious. I wonder why you think that, Mark. EAB, corn on corn managed right, can't beat it. I love, for corn on corn, I did that one field. That's the field that I mined for 9 seasons, and my phosphorus levels went up. Because I did 3 years of corn on corn, and the soil, it really, look at all that. And I was going to do a video on cover crops of corn, like what a wonderful cover crop corn is for building soil. Um, because a big massive root system and all that residue and stuff just to feed everything and do everything. Um, Mark has a 12 row. Yeah, I have a 12 row as well. Adam, it's a 12 row. It's a B&H bar. I need to build conditioners for it. I had a few people ask about some custom trials, to do some strip till plots, but I'd like to see conditioners on it before I did anything like that. But yeah, I'm happy with the bar. Kuhn Krause really has a beautiful row unit. They really do. But everybody used the Hinnekers, you could get some used Hinnekers out there at a pretty good price too. The early Hinnekers, they pushed their gauge wheels instead of pull. They made some changes, but even the early ones were still a pretty good looking. It was built on their 6000 series row crop cultivator. In fact, if you could find a 6000 series cultivator, they had a conversion kit that you could do, and that's almost where I tried to. When I bought mine, strip till rigs were just on fire. Like if you saw one listed, you called, it's gone. And so there was no screwing around. Corn on corn takes more nitrogen and more insecticide. You can almost match optimal yields for about 5 years before the rootworms and endworms cost you more than the corn. So the entomologist comes up here to our farm show each year, and that was her career, was corn rootworm. And she could cure corn rootworm. At the time, it would only cost you about $1,200 an acre, but she just literally make up vials of nematodes and inject it into your soil. And you could cure corn rootworm that way. And that's where we talk about, them guys were talking about Brix readings. Is that when you get to like a 9 or a 10 or 11, it pushes most insect problems away. I found that, and they did list corn rootworm as one of them. And I want to ask her about that, Anne Marie Journey, if she knew more, because she was talking about every year she comes up to the farm show. Last year, you guys that didn't come, you missed out, because she had a great 15-minute detour conversation about worms in the soil, and that was just great. But the corn rootworm, the natural predator to corn rootworm was nematodes, and same with the SCN, soybean cyst nematode. The natural predator to soybean cyst nematode was another nematode, but we keep putting nematicides and we keep doing tillage, aggressive primary tillage, which keeps building the environment for the bad nematodes and the bad worms. Farming in 4G, yeah, don't forget weather plays a big role in crunching numbers, and I would imagine that you're also, when you say comparing numbers, also for you compared to a lot of the other parts of the country would be other crops buying acres out from corn and beans for you, because you have a lot of opportunity there. Historically speaking, you guys had a lot. How many horsepower per row on them strip tills? That's going to be very up to you on your farm. For me here, the Massey is 270 on the PTO. Draw bar pull, it's somewhere between like an 84 and 8520 John Deere. And that I have no problem pulling the strip till bar. There's some ground that the computer takes over. So I just hit, like a 6.5 mile an hour cruise control speed. And there's some spots that it'll drop it down to like 4.5 miles an hour and just pull. But that was last fall when everything was so dry. it was doing a good job at 6 inches. I mean, it was just doing a great job on some of them fields that were getting compacted and trying to transition from full tillage. And then there's other spots that at 6.5 miles an hour, the engine RPMs are dropping, to 1,300, 1,400 RPM, and you're just rolling on through. Like, we can look at some soils and see how things compare to different practices. Take out the mini and dig some random holes. It'd be interesting with your organic. It'd be really curious to see if you had, what kind of structure can you build in organic when you always have to work the soil. That would be interesting to see. That's a good idea. Teff grass pencils out about 4 tons to the acre. Corn on corn is much tougher to do than just say I'm going to do it. I try to avoid it like the plague. When I did it, I found yield loss second year, then came back, but insects further south stop. Interesting. Teff grass. I haven't tried any teff on its own. I think we had some of it. So Mark has a 12 row as well, and you're pulling it with a 240 MX with a Montag box behind it. Yeah. So be curious in the soils. Our soil gets really tight. That top 6 inches that you're trying to strip through on some of these fields, you're trying to transition them away from full till. They can get tight. Like, I can jump on a spade, and we saw at the farm show last year. Like, so they can pull kind of hard. We got clay at 9 inches, so you stay away from that. That clay, boy, at 8 inches, you can roll through a field pretty okay sometimes, and you touch to 9 inches, and it's like bubble gum around the point. Two happy children. Glad to see you're here. I like Two Happy Children. He's got a lot of videos out there, and and he's going through a lot of this stuff. He's a few steps ahead of me on a lot of this stuff, especially on the tissue sampling and some of that stuff. So I'm kind of watching him to see what we can do. Mark strip till is a down pluribus. Pulls pretty easy. Yeah. Adam, you're the only one doing teff around here. Teff versus alfalfa. Yeah, that would be a good one, Brad. Teff at 4 ton compared to alfalfa at 5 to 6 ton. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I love alfalfa. It just, once it's established, it goes through the drought so good, it tons so good, makes such good feed quality. I would imagine teff would do the same thing. I have no idea about teff, but alfalfa I like for the rotation. So our goal is to try and get these hay fields, we're seeding some down each year with the goal that pretty soon teff is an annual for corn. Okay. Our goal with the hay fields, yeah, that's where I like the alfalfa, because in a couple of years, alfalfa can just put down a ton of roots, and then it comes out of hay field before that soil starts to tighten back up around it. So then the teff, is that going to be a fixer of N? Are you stating that, Brad? Or are you asking that? I started making more money when I focused earthworms and soybeans. Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying, Brad. Yep. alfalfa is fixing the end in the deep row. Yep. That's exactly why I want to keep it in the rotation. And in our environment, the grasses don't recover that quick. Like I got a couple fields of horse hay, and the landowners have to keep it that way. Um, so it's not my choice; it's their choice. But on the alfalfa, every 28 to 30 days, you're making a cutting, and on that horse hay, 2 cuttings a year, a lot less tonnage, but it feeds good. That goofy grass feeds good. Farming at 4G for the weedy areas, alfalfa works, and for the organic. And for you, do you have any saline spots out there on your field, or is that more northwest of you? Um, uh, Alfalfa can be one of them plants for this. If you got saline spots, stop tilling it, because when you till the saline, what they claim is the evaporation goes and it actually pulls the salts up. And then where if you don't till it, the natural water helps hold the salts down. And then if you start to use alfalfa and other some cereals and stuff, and just kind of mow it as it will, and you'll see them work their way into the saline. Adam, since TEF is an annual, it works good on the rented ground. That's a good idea. Absolutely. It Yeah, that is another thing we thought about. So on the one rented field behind the wheat, we are going to just do an annual. Caden Dunne. Oh, you'll have to rewind this, Caden, and see the beginning. I did mention you. I didn't mention you by name. Well, I did now. Secret's out. But with your fancy little Massey 5S sitting in the showroom floor. Caden, you're doing a Tef clover and alfalfa mix this year. See how it goes. Yeah, that goes good. You know, at the cost of fertilizer, it's kind of coming down a little bit now lately. But at the cost of fertilizer, a couple of years ago, to rotate the crops away from anything of corn and beans was kind of financially tough. But now when you can buy your acres in with producing fertilizer and stuff, it changes your numbers. Yeah, the alkali spots, they're more west of you, a bit more heavy. You guys actually have a guy that has seed mixtures for them alkali spots. I never heard of that until I got to tour a bunch of farms in 2018. I actually was touring a bunch of farms out there, and I learned about them alkali spots. There was a lot of things out on that tour. That was fantastic. That was the first time I ever heard an agronomist talk about you don't have to have a square field. And I just started laughing. Like, he's like, yeah, you don't have to have a square field. I just literally started laughing and looking around the crowd, and people are staring at me. And I'm like, I'm from Minnesota. Like, everything we're taught is plow to the bottom of the ditch lines and knock out every tree and everything you can find. And you just have to power through it. And now an agronomist is saying that maybe you have a bad spot in the field that you have to manage differently. Like, you're crazy. I treat the fertility program on the Tef close to the same as corn. It's shallow rooted, does very well in dry conditions. You may lose some tonnage if it's dry. Brad, what's the cost? It's $100, 50 pounds, 10 pounds rate. That ain't so bad. 20 bucks an acre on the seed, if my math is correct that quick in my head. The only way to grow organic seed corn is to plant it next to a fresh cut alfalfa field, no till. I've tried it all different ways. Seeds corn never really canopies. Really tough to grow. Caden Dunne, 115 for a 50 to hourly seed house. have a 5-acre field of alfalfa that went back to corn and bean rotation. The corn yield in that 5 acres is 10 to 20 bushels higher. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I asked the landlord a spot out in that field. We had one rented ground. We had a spot out there. And every year for the last 3 or 4 years that we've taken that field over, we're trying to whip that field into shape, trying to build it up and turn it into something. But every year over on that one spot, you come around and the crop is just huge, and then it tapers down to the rest. And I said, what's the history of that spot? And he said, when he was young, that used to be the cow area. And to this day, it does better. And yeah, there's, I think that comes back to our biological side of things, that there's more going on to the soil than NPK to grow our crop. I think he figured out the 25 an acre for his TEF program. TEF is comparable to Timothy Hay. Okay, yeah. Roman Timothy, a couple of old timers I used to throw bales for. They always had Brom and Timothy in their alfalfa. That was old Oliver. Old Oliver, he was a neat old guy. Nice old guy. Most people, when you were young, and you're throwing small squares for these old guys, they'd kind of shift a few gears, and be like, work harder. And honest to God, you're standing at the front of the rack, and he had the 40-20 in like second or third gear, and you were literally waiting for the bale. You were just like, come on. And I told Oliver, grab another gear. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, grab another gear. And he grabs another gear, and I think he went from second to third, and you were still literally carry the bale to the back of the rack and then come up to the front and just stand there and wait. And grab another one, Oliver. The one thing on alfalfa, so the Lions Classic had that guy. He went from alfalfa. He only had a 500 cow dairy, so he got a couple cows to try this stuff on. They went from pure alfalfa to several clovers, annual ryegrass, a hairy vetch mix, and a sorghum Sudan grass mix, and that was his annual hay field. And so their tonnage per acre shot way up. First cutting feed value was a little bit lower than the alfalfa. Second cutting was fairly comparable, and third cutting would be very, very hot mix. And then the next spring, the annual ryegrass and hairy vetch would sometimes overwinter. So they would take some of that cutting, and that would be very, very high protein. And they had one cutting go over 300 on the feed quality. And so you only need a few pounds per cow of that per day. But he said by going away from the straight alfalfa and going to that mixed grasses, their milk production was still doing just as good, but their herd health, the breeding got better, and they actually had less veterinary calls. And I found that rather interesting because I didn't really ever think that alfalfa was hard on cows, but it might be different. The dairies, they're pushing them pretty hard. The protein is higher in the teff than most grasses. Yeah, with our beef, alfalfa and orchard ton out the best here. Yeah. With the beef, though, we're not pushing the protein. If we can average, most of our alfalfa this year was pretty poor quality. A lot of it's 13% protein, but normally if you get up there 17, 18, 19%, keep the good stuff. Quality in, quality out. The steers do good on it. The cows graze at alfalfa, just beautiful. I was really impressed with that. I was kind of nervous. To be honest, I was very scared to start grazing the alfalfa, and then Dwayne Munson Tiger, he's like, you'll be just fine. And it was. It turned out perfect. As the alfalfa started greening up and growing, the cows were, their rumen was transitioning, and there was zero blowout. I did have one cow. It was later in the spring, and so the first cutting alfalfa was already starting to get a little bit old, but the second cutting was starting to come up through. And when she walked in front, you could see her side lifted above her spine like a traditional bloat. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, crap, that's our first bloat. And so I followed her around for a while, and she wasn't chewing cud. And I'm like, oh, crap, what are we going to do? I thought I was going to have Larson come up and drill a hole in her, screw in the cork, and whistle out some air, get that bloat out. But then I just walked away, came back in a couple hours, and got her up to check her, and she took a big old poop, and she did just fine. No blowout, but you can see as the first cutting started to die, or not die, but first cutting started to get old and go away. Second cutting came in, you could see it on the manure was getting really loose. Dwayne lives right across the road from you. Yep, right there on 47. Fantastic, John. Or fantastic guy. Red Brad said my name. Big needle instead of the corkscrew. Dwayne, very intelligent, very smart guy. Does a good job. And so they grave that clover all the time. And so that was really interesting to see from there. And you got a cow that's like that all the time. We got old 110. She's getting up there pretty old, and her tummy, you can't tell if she's ever bred or if she's ready to calve, just had a calf, doesn't matter. She's just kind of that one side. She's so old, it's starting to droop on that one side. Dwayne, I when we first started getting into trying to finish steers on grass, of course, we had a big cover crop. That's when I had the cover crop stand out there, and all the neighbors are like, you can never graze steers, they're going to walk all that weight off. I will EAV, and they're going to walk all that weight off. And then somehow we had fixed the tractor for Dwayne, and so we knew what he was doing. So I called him up, and he's like, you'll be just fine, use some fence to limit their walking and roaming around, and make them clean it up kind of deal, and manage it. And then you go see what they do, and they the clover, they're watching sugar content in the clover and managing it. So they're moving fencing every day, and they're finishing out nice. But Tony gives me a hard time. I'm like, our cows are really efficient on grass. Look how big they are. You got 1,700 pound, just big, gorgeous, fat heifers out there. And he's like, oh, look at the quality. You get the other winter, we were feeding 21% protein, 200, almost 210 relative feed quality stuff. That was a Shane Holtz bought a bunch of that stuff for his milk cows. And that's what we were feeding our beef. And we gained weight through the wintertime on that stuff. And that was good winter feed. They don't walk it off if they have enough to eat. The steer, I don't know, it's goofy. The steers in that tall stuff, it's like they just got bored. They weren't even eating. They would just walk. I think, they were grazing is what they were doing when we had that super tall stuff. The poop. Yep, that tells you a lot. It was kind of interesting because we had oats and an oilseed radish, and the oilseed radish
got pretty tall. Karen couldn't see above the canopy of the cover crops that year, and you couldn't walk your feed through it. We had to take the 40/20, the brush cutter, to move the hot wire. It was so thick and beautiful. But you watched them, and one had his head down eating the young alfalfa and ryegrass, and the next one, he's just walking around nipping radish tops, the oilseed radish. They threw a little bean pod, and you're like, "What are you doing, you dummies?" And they were just meander through, and that's when we had to bring in the hot wire fence, because otherwise they were just picking the good stuff they wanted, and they were trampling so much, which is fine. It all went back to the soil, but that's the one where we were I think that's the one where we had 25 cents a day per head feed cost for the summer on them steers. Like, how do you ever do that? That was with the cost of the seed, and they had to pay rent on that pasture. That was pretty, just direct feed costs, it was 25 cents. That was remarkable. Versus today, what's corn? I don't even know what corn from the mill is. Can you get it for 7-8 cents a pound? Can you, could you feed an animal this winter? Could you feed a steer on a conventional steer suffer program? Could you do it for $2 to $3 a day? If you figure in some fuel and TMR costs and things like that, it adds up. But guys, I am going to cut this off. We did go 2 hours. I thank you very much. Thank you so very much. And yeah, I really appreciate that you guys hung out with me for 2 hours. This is phenomenal. We definitely have to do this. The Midwest Goodbye started an hour ago. That now you sound like my wife. Just like when we walk in, when we enter a place, she's like, just start saying goodbye now. Thank you for that, Farming 4G. That you guys have a good night. And I don't know how I end this. Oh, I hit the end stream button. And I will definitely keep people, but we need to do this again. This was super fun. And I appreciate every one of you guys that had the comments to keep this going. And I appreciate it very much.